In this video, I'll go over navigation for the Apache. The navigation system will be most accurate if you have GPS in your mission. To turn on GPS, first click this button and make sure you have USA on your team. And then click the cloud button and make sure the date is set past March 28, 1994. The other way you can turn on GPS is by clicking Customize Mission Options and going to Unrestricted SatNav and clicking Enforce here and then clicking Enable here. The Apache has three things for navigation: the backup compass, radio nav, and waypoint nav. First we'll go over the backup compass. It's right here. This is just a regular magnetic compass. You'd probably never need it in DCS, but at least you know where it is. Next, let's go over radio nav. Radio nav lets you fly to these radio stations on the map here that are called NDBs. These are these little circles that are made up of a bunch of dots. It kind of looks like a net, and you can fly to these in the Apache. So first what you do is on one of your screens, click the button that says TSD. The TSD page is your it's basically your navigation page. It brings up your map. And you click the button that says INST for instrument mode. Instrument mode is kind of like a backup mode. So radio nav in the Apache is kind of meant as more of a backup. You're primarily meant to use waypoint navigation. So once you're in instrument mode, as you can see, there's a stopwatch up here. If you want, you can click it and stop it and reset it, but we're going over radio nav right now. So the way you do radio nav is you click once you're in instrument mode, you click utility, and you see the button here that says ADF. You can see the circle is hollow, so you click it to fill the circle on, and it turns on ADF. And now we need to dial in the frequency. So you can do a preset channel or manual. So for manual frequency, what you need to do is you need to click the util button again to get out of util mode, and make sure you're in instrument mode, and you can see it says frequency right here. So what you need to do is go to your NDB station, and you can see it says 326 kilohertz. So I'm going to click frequency, and I'm going to go to my keyboard and type in 326 and click enter. And you can see now the little line is going to move until it points to the station. So I'm going to get out my compass, and the station is 266 degrees, and you can see the line is pointing about 266 degrees. And you can also see it on your flight page. If you click aircraft and click flight here, you can see there's a little circle with a line sticking up. So I'm going to actually point the Apache towards it. So as you can see, now I'm pointing towards the NDB, and the little circle with the line is right there, and it also shows up on your iHads. I'm actually going to turn a little bit left so you can see it easier. On the iHads, you can see it right there. Now you can also hear the Morse code if you want. What you need to do is go to your countermeasures panel and set the audio switch to nav, and then you should be able to hear the Morse code. You can adjust the volume of the ADF Morse code with this knob right here, and if you click this tone button, you'll hear a constant tone. I'm going to turn the audio off. So now I'll go over how to use the ADF channels. So in instrument mode, if you click util, you can see these three channels right here. So it has the channel name and the frequency. So if I want to save a channel in, I need to remember the frequency is 326. So I'm going to select a channel and click frequency and type 326 and enter. So now it says 326, and I can also change the words here. So I could click ID, I'll just type in ABC and click enter. And you can see here I have ABC tuned into 326. And if you want to change channels, you need to select one and then click tune right here. So now it's trying to tune to a different channel. And now I can click this and click tune to go back to the other channel. And when you're in the util page, you can change the mode from ADF to antenna. I'm not sure what antenna does, but when I click it, nothing happens, so I assume you should just leave it in ADF. And also, if you get out of the util page, when you're in instrument mode, you can also see ident and test. As far as I'm aware, ident doesn't do anything, but if you click test, then it will kind of run a test of the ADF system. It'll point the little line off to the side, and then it'll go back to normal. And also with ADF, if you want to tune to your last frequency, you can just click the last freq button. And one more thing, actually, in the util page, you can see emergency down here, and there's two frequencies, 500 and 2182. The manual said it tunes the ADF to some sort of international emergency frequencies. I'm not sure, what exactly it's for in regards to ADF. I know that there's emergency frequencies for regular radio communications, the UHF is 243 and the VHF is 1215. I'm not sure what the emergency 4 is when it comes to ADF, but that's there if you want it. Also, I'm going to go over the controls you're going to need. You're going to need HOCAS cursor controller X and Y axis. You can have these as axes or as keybinds. You're going to need cursor enter, and then there's also cursor display select. You don't need this, but it is nice to have it binded. The next thing I want to go over is moving your cursor around. So you can move your cursor around on the screen, and you can also get it to the other screen by moving it all the way to the edge and then bumping it. And now you can see it's on this screen, and I can move it to the edge and then bump it again, and it goes back to this screen. Or you can just use this keybind I showed you earlier, and if you click the keybind, it quickly swaps your cursors between the screens. Next, I'll go over Waypoint navigation. Waypoint navigation uses the same page as ADF navigation. It uses the TSD page. So if you want to get to it, you just click the TSD button. And for waypoint navigation, you do not use instrument mode. So instrument mode we were in here earlier is the backup mode for visual flying and for radio nav. But whenever you're using waypoint nav, you want to be out of instrument mode. So make sure it's unboxed. Now before I go over waypoint nav, I want to just go over some basics of the TSD. So you can adjust the background map brightness with the video switch here. I usually turn it down a little bit so it's easier to see the words. And you can actually adjust the settings for the map by clicking this button. There's different maps you can bring up. You can have chart, which is just a regular map, and you can also have digital. If you have it in digital, it's an elevation map, so it's easier to see the mountains. And then you can put it in satellite, which is just a satellite map. It's kind of hard to tell right now, but if I increase the brightness and zoom in, you can see it's a satellite display. And then there's also stick, which is just nothing. And if you're in stick mode, you can actually display video footage in the background. So if you click the vid button and click TADS, and right now you can see the gunner's camera. So I'm gonna go back to the TSD, and since I'm in stick mode now, the video footage is being displayed along with my navigation info. But this is kind of confusing to look at the same time, so I usually don't do that. So I'm gonna click map, and I'm just gonna change it back to chart mode. Now when you're in chart mode, you can adjust the scale of the background map. So you can click this button and I can change it. As you can see, I just leave it on whatever it was as default. And also if you're in digital mode, you can change the color band here. So if you click this, you can set it to aircraft based. So when you have it to aircraft color band, you'll have 3 colors: red, yellow, and gray. So if something is red, it means it's above you, so you should be careful. You should either not go that way or increase your altitude. If something's yellow, it's about the same altitude as you, so you should be careful. And if something is gray, then it's below you. And you can also set it to elevation based. So if you have the color band elevation based, then the more red something is, the higher altitude it is. So if I zoom out, you can see the mountains here are going yellow and orange, and then the lower altitudes are green. And for these other settings here, like FFD and contours, these do not do anything. Also, when you're in the map settings, you can adjust the orientation here. So if you have it to heading up, then the map direction will move while the aircraft moves, and it will be based on what direction the helicopter is pointing. If you set it to track up, then it'll be based on the direction you're moving. So for example, if my nose is pointing 300 degrees, but let's say there's a little bit of wind pushing me right, my heading would be 300, but my track might be 310 or 320. The track is the direction you're actually moving. And then you can set it to north up, which is basically the map will just have north on top. So I just leave it to track up. And the view here doesn't do anything, it's only 2D. There's also a grid in the background of the map. You can't see it right now, but if I put it to stick mode, it's a little easier. Let me actually turn off the video display. In stick mode, you can see the grid now, so you can choose to turn the grid off or leave it on. And there's also this distance here for the grid. So right now it's 25, which means that each line is separated by 25 kilometers. And if I zoom in, you can see now they're separated by 10 kilometers. And the slope shade button doesn't do anything. So that was the page that allows you to adjust the settings for the map. So I got out of the map page and now I'm in the main TSD page. So the blue symbol here is your helicopter, and there is some information on the bottom. So first you can see this that says calm. This just shows you the winds. So if there is more wind, then it'll give you a speed and direction, but right now it just says calm. And the EN is endurance. This just tells you how much longer you can fly for. So right now I have enough fuel to fly for 3 hours and 30 minutes. And this box on the bottom left gives you information about your waypoint. I actually don't have any waypoints right now. Okay, so I just put down a waypoint, and I'll show you how to do that later, but if you have a waypoint that you have selected to fly to, then as you can see, it shows you the waypoint name and how far away it is, and it also, when you're flying, it'll show you how long it'll take to get there. And by the way, everything in the Apache is in kilometers by default, but if you want, you can change it to nautical miles. So what you do is click aircraft and click flight and set, and you can change the units to nautical miles. And you can see they change here too, but I'm just going to leave it in kilometers. And you can also see there's some boxes on the top and bottom. So this box on the top is the direction you're pointing right now, and this one on the bottom is the direction you need to face to go to your waypoint. You can also adjust the scale with these buttons here. You can zoom out and zoom in, and if you hold it, you can zoom in and zoom out slowly, but I usually don't do that. I just click. Then there's the freeze button. You can click this to just freeze the map, and you can click it again to unfreeze it. And then there's the cursor acquisition button. Next, I'll go over cursor acquisition. What this does is it lets you select a point as an acquisition source. So I'll go over points a little bit later, but basically you can see you can select your acquisition source here, and what the acquisition source is that it lets you select something to slave your sensors to. So if I jump into the gunner's seat and I set my acquisition source as fixed, and you see if I move my camera off and then I click the slave button, it points the camera towards the acquisition source, towards the fixed. Fixed just means it points it forward. But what I can actually do is I can set one of these points as my acquisition. So I click cursor acquisition, and I'm going to go over to waypoint 1 and click cursor enter. And now you can see my acquisition source is waypoint 1. So if I click slave, it's going to point the camera to waypoint 1. And if you do cursor acquisition and you don't select any point that's already there, what it does is it makes this special type of point here. And you can only have one for each, one for the pilot and one for the co-pilot. So if I click cursor acquisition and click enter somewhere, you can see it moves the co-pilot's one. And you can see it doesn't create a new one, it just moves it. And it automatically sets the acquisition source to TRN, which is this special type of point. And you can see now I can slave the camera to that too. The SA button here doesn't do anything. And then one of the most important things on the main page here is the phase. So you can see nav phase and attack phase. So the two phases here display different types of information. The nav phase shows, waypoints and, things for navigating, and attack phase shows targets and stuff like that. So in the phases, you can click the show button, and you can see there's show, and then there's threat show and coordinate show. And when you're in the show menus, you can select what you want each phase to have. So in the nav phase, I want to have waypoints, obstacles, co-pilot cursor, and maybe for the attack phase, I don't want to have my current route. I want to have, maybe still co-pilot cursor. And basically for each phase, you can swap back between attack and nav, and you can select what exactly you want to see on each phase. Now for each phase, most of the settings are the same, but there are actually some things that can only be shown in certain phases. For example, you have to be in attack phase to see low priority radar targets. And in nav phase, I think you can see any waypoints, but in attack phase, you can only see waypoints that are in your current flight plan. And there are some, and I'll put a picture on the screen that shows, the exact differences. But for the most part, between nav and attack phase, you have the same options. And when you're in the show page, you can also adjust some of the things I talked about earlier. So you can see I can turn off the wind and endurance settings if I want. I can bring up the HSI, which is automatically brought up when you're in instrument mode, but I usually leave it off because it's just takes up space. You can also turn on cursor info, which just shows the coordinates of where your cursor is. You can see the co-pilot's cursor. You can show obstacles and inactive zones. Inactive zones has to do with data links, so I'm not going to go over that in this video. According to the manual, obstacles doesn't do anything. And then there's threat show. So for threat show, this doesn't make any difference whether you're in nav or attack mode. In fact, the setting's not even here. So in threat show, what this does is when the defensive systems in the aircraft detects a threat, it'll show up on your page here. So you can either click this to disable it or click this to show threats on your nav page. And visual shading right here doesn't do anything right now. So that's what threat show is. And actually, if you click the weapon button and go to ASC. And I'm gonna, I'll have a separate video for defensive systems, but you can see there's auto page here. So auto page will override your threat show settings. So what auto page does is you can select a mode like search. So if your plane detects a target that's searching you, then it'll automatically show it on your nav display. So this auto page setting overrides this. So even if this is turned off, if there's a target that's searching me, it'll show it up here anyways. And then there's these settings on the side. So these allow you to have rings around different things. So for example, terrain point is that special point I told you about earlier, like the one here that says pilot and one for CPG. So you can see if I want, I can enable it to put some rings around the terrain point. And also you can click this to go to own. So if you want, you can put rings around your own aircraft, like the ghost ship, which I'll talk about in a second. And also if you turn on threats, then threats will have yellow rings and red rings. The yellow ring will be the distance where the threat can see you, and the red ring will be the distance where the threat can fire weapons at you. And the last show page is coordinate show. If I switch between nav and attack, you can see, like I mentioned, most of the settings options are the same. You get an extra option on attack, which is shot, and this kind of has to do with data link, but it'll show like coordinates where you shot missiles at. But in the coordinate show page, you can show the different types of coordinates, so friendly units, enemy units, planned control measures, and I'll talk about the different types of points in a second here. But basically that was what the show page is. So all of that was just to tell you the difference between, attack mode and nav mode. The last thing I think is on the main menu page is the pan button. So if you click this, it goes into pan mode, which just lets you move around the map like this. And in pan mode, it brings up the white ship, which is the ghost ship. So the ghost ship is where you're panning to, but the blue ship is where your helicopter actually is. And there's also this altitude control. I don't know what this, I think it controls the altitude of your ghost ship, but I don't know, what effect it would actually have. I'm not sure why you would use it, but that's there if you want it. There's different pan modes. Right now I'm in cursor mode, but you can actually click this to go to normal mode, and you can move your cursor, and then you can click enter, and then it'll move your map. But I think in pan mode, I think it's better to leave it in cursor so you can pan like this. And then there's these route buttons. So if you have a route made, and I'll tell you what a route is later, but if you have a route, you can use the arrows here to scroll through, to pan through the different waypoints in your route. In pan mode, you can also click these arrows here to change the heading, and you can also hold the arrows down if you want. There's also this last pan button. I think it's supposed to take you to the last place you had been panned to, but when I click it, it doesn't do anything. So I'm not sure if it doesn't work or if I'm just doing something wrong. You can also pan to a specific point. So if you click the point button, if I type in W01 and click enter, you can see it'll pan me to waypoint 1. And once you get out of pan mode, it'll still be in freeze mode, so you need to unclick freeze to go back to normal. Just a couple more things I forgot to mention. If you click PP up here, it shows your present position, so it just shows the current coordinates of your helicopter. And you can click the center button to have your aircraft in the middle or to have it at the bottom. And also you can see where the camera is pointing. So if I go to the front seat and move the TADS around, as the TADS moves, you can see the little cursor. And also if the TADS is lasing, so let me arm it and start lasing. When the TADS lases, well, you can't see right now because it's kind of messed up, but while the TADS is lasing, it'll be white instead of green. So those were the basics of the map, but now let me show you how to actually navigate it, how to actually make waypoints and stuff. So you can see all your points by clicking the coordinate button, and these are all your waypoints. Right now, line and area don't do anything, but you can see if you click this button, there's 4 different types of waypoints. There's waypoints, hazards, control measures, and then there's threat points, which is if you click coordinates. And then there's shot, but that has to do with data links, so I'll go over that in a different video. So you can see I have 2 waypoints here. I have 1 control measure and I have 2 target points. So if you want to actually make a waypoint, what you do is you need to get out of the coordinate page and you need to click the point button down here. So this is the page where you make waypoints, and you can see all these settings: add, edit, and delete. And I'll talk about store later. And transmit has to do with data links, so that'll be a different video. So to add a point, you just click the add button, and then what you need to do is you can choose your 4 types of points here: waypoint, hazard, control measure, or target. So make sure you click add, have the type of waypoint you want selected, and then you need to click this button here that says ident. And the first thing it wants you to tell it is what type of symbol you want to put down, because there's a million different symbols you can put down, and you can see them by clicking ABR right here, and you can see all these different types of codes. And basically you can see there's the, LZ is a landing zone, PP is a passage point, and there's waypoints. You can see the hazards, and then you can see control measures, and these are all control measures, and then you can see target points. So you have to type in one of these codes. So like if I'm doing a waypoint, I have to type in one of these codes. But if I'm doing a control measure, if I type in LZ, it's not going to work. I'm going to have to do one of these control measure codes like AP. Since I had a regular waypoint selected, I need to choose one of these here. So I could do landing zone, whatever. I always just type in WP, which is just a regular waypoint. But if you really want to get into it, you can choose one of these. But I'm just going to type in WP for a regular waypoint. So once you have ident selected, I'm going to type in WP and click enter. And now it wants you to type in free text. So this is 3 letters, and you can just type in whatever you want just to help you. Like for example, I could just type in ABC and click enter. And you can see now it has waypoint 3 ABC. But you don't have to type in free text. Like if I do this again, let me type WP. See, when it says free text, if it's blank, you can just click enter again. And it defaults the free text to the waypoint number, so waypoint 3. So now it wants you to type the coordinates in. So there's different ways. I'll show you the easy way first, is just move your cursor and just put it where you want. So I want to put a waypoint on this mountain. And then you click cursor enter. And then it put the position down. And now it wants your altitude. By default, it sets it to the altitude of the ground level at that position, so I just leave it like that. But if you want, you could click clear and type the altitude in. So what you could do is type in the altitude you want, but I'm just going to do 3126, and then click enter. And then you have your waypoint made, and you can see it as 3 here. And if you're in the attack phase, you might not be able to see your waypoint, so make sure to click it so you're in nav phase. Now let me show you the other way to make a waypoint, which is by typing the coordinates in. So what you do is just click add, and let's just do a waypoint again. And you click ident, and I'm just going to do WP, enter, and then free text, just click enter. And then instead of moving my cursor, what I'm going to do is just go here and just click clear. And we need to get the coordinates now. So I'm going to put a waypoint here, so hold left alt on your keyboard and left click. And the coordinates the Apache uses is MGRS grid, these ones right here. And you can see there's 5 numbers for easting and 5 for northing. So the Apache only uses 4, so 8 in total. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type the grid coordinates in. So I'm going to do 11 S PA. I'm going to type 4 easting, so 1394, so 1394, and then 4891. And click enter, and then click enter for the altitude. So that there you can see my waypoint now, so that's how you make it by typing the coordinates in. Now the Apache is mainly meant to use the grid coordinates, but you can actually also use lat long decimal minutes right here. So let me get a new point right here, and I'm going to click add waypoint, and I'll do for the ident WP, enter, enter, and I'm going to click clear, and I'm going to use lat long decimal minutes here. And for the Apache, you can see the lat long decimal minutes here gives you 3 numbers after the decimal place, but the Apache only takes 2 numbers after the decimal place. So I would type in 363414. So I'm going to type it in. I'm going to type in N for north, and then I'm going to do 36 and 34 and 14, and then you type in W for west, and you can see the western coordinate starts with 3 digits instead of 2. So if you had a westing or easting coordinate that only had 2 digits, then in that case, you would start it with a 0. So like if there was 2 digits, I would type in 015. But since this has 3 digits, I'm going to type in all 3. So I do west 115, and then 40, and then 06, and then click enter, and I'm going to click enter for altitude. And you can see I made waypoint 4 right there. Now there is actually a really quick way to put waypoints down. You just click add, and then you don't click the ident button, just ignore this, and you just move the cursor where you want and click enter. And you can put a waypoint down really quickly like that. But keep in mind, if you do it like that, then you can't adjust the symbols. So if I have this point selected and click edit, you can see I can edit the free text here, so I could do, BB and click enter. And I can adjust the coordinates and stuff, but I can't change the symbol. It doesn't give me that ident option. And if you're doing this quick method where you ignore this top and you just click add and then just put it down with the cursor enter, basically you can't change the symbol. There's a default one depending on what you have selected. So if you have a waypoint, it'll just be a regular waypoint. Target, target, it'll just be a regular target point. Control measure, it'll be a checkpoint, and if you do hazard, it'll be a tower under 1,000 feet. So that's a quick way to add waypoints. You can also edit waypoints. So if you want to edit a waypoint, you need to select one first. So to select a waypoint, you can either hover over with your cursor and then do cursor enter, or you can just do this here and type it in. So if I do W04 and click enter, I have waypoint 4 selected, and you can see it's highlighted right here. And by the way, if you're selecting a point with this method where you're clicking this and typing the waypoint name in, basically the point name will have a letter and then a number, and the letter is based on what type of point it is. So like I mentioned earlier, in the coordinate page, you can see waypoints, hazards, control measures, and target points. So a target point will be T and a number, control measure will be C and a number, like this one is C51, and then waypoints will be W and hazard will be H. So once you have it selected, you just click edit, and you can click this here and you can change the free text to whatever you want, and you can change the coordinates and altitude. And you can also delete a waypoint, so just select one. So let me select waypoint 1, and you can click delete, and you can do yes or no to delete it. Now there's actually other ways you can make waypoints. This was just how you make it from this page, but you can also click points and click store. And if you click store, it just puts a waypoint, right over where your helicopter is. So I can choose a type. Let's do a target or just a waypoint. And if I click now, then you can see it puts waypoint 5 right over my current position. So I'm just going to actually delete that one. And there's also extra options from the front seat. In the front seat, what you can do is go to the waypoint page and click store. And you can still click now to put it, right on top of your position. But you can also use the store button right here to store a point based on where your camera is. So what you need to do is you need to bind this one, RHG site select switch TADS. And when you actually select the TADS as a site, you're going to have this display come up on your iHads. So if you want to get rid of it, you can click I. And if you want to see what site is selected, you can look here. So I have HMD and now I have TADS selected. So once TADS is selected, what you do is point the TADS where you want, and you need to have a range source. So for the TADS, you need to be lasing when you put a point down. So you need to bind this button here, RHG LRFD second detent. And what you do is, since I'm on the ground, I can't lase, I need to actually arm it. So what you do is you pull the second detent to lase, and once you're lasing, the range here will update accurately. So when I move the TADS around, you can see where the TADS is looking, but the range might not be right. And once you pull the laser trigger, you can see the range will update. So I'm going to point it here and I'm going to lase, and let me actually zoom in a little bit. So once I got my accurate range, then what I'm going to do is click store right here. You can just right click on it and you can see it actually put a point down right there. And I can do that, or I can do a target point. So that's one way you can make points with the TADS. You can also make points just by looking. So what you do is you need to bind this button, Site Select HMD. So you click Site Select HMD and it says HMD here. And then all you need to do is, I need to click I to turn my iHads back on. And then all you need to do is, you need to set your range. So click on the weapon button and click man range and click A for auto and click enter. And then you can, point your head wherever you want and then click the store button. So you might want to have that bound to your HOTAS. I'm just going to look, right at the floor right there and click store. And you can see it put a waypoint right where I was looking. So it put waypoint 7 right there. And then when you're done doing that, you can click this to get out of store mode. Now something to keep in mind is that you do not need to have the store page open to store a target with the TADS or with the gunner's iHads. It's just that if you do it that way, you won't be able to store it as a waypoint. It'll store as a target point. For example, if I go store and I have waypoint selected and then I get out of the store page, if I store a point here, you can see it still stores the point, but it defaulted as a target point because I didn't have the store page open. If I want to store it as a waypoint, I have to have the store page open and store selected here. So that was all the ways you can create waypoints, and you can click point and get out of the point page. So if you click the coordinates button, then you can see all the waypoints you made show up here, and you can go through the different pages. So now you can see all your waypoints here, and if I go to attack phase, I can see my target points. And like I mentioned, you can click show, and you can click show, threat show, coordinate show, and you can select what you want to see in nav and attack mode. But it's kind of confusing because they're not connected. So if you want to make a flight plan, it's kind of hard to figure out where you're supposed to go. So that's what the route page is for. So you click route, and here you can add waypoints into your route. So if you click route and click RTM, you can see all your routes here, Alpha, Bravo, Delta, and you can select what route you want to do. And if you have a route selected, you can actually click this to reverse the route. And if you want, you can delete a route. You can click delete and click one of your routes and click yes. So like I'm going to delete route Alpha here, and you can see now it's gone. So what I'm going to do is click new, and I'm going to select a route. I think Alpha is already selected by default. And basically you can add points you want to the route. So what you do is just click add, and I want to add waypoint 1. So I can select it, and like I mentioned, there's two ways to select it. You can either hover over and you can do cursor enter like this, and you can see I have point 1 selected, or you can just click here and type in the name. So I could type in W01, enter. So once you got a point selected here and you click add here, then you just click end, and it adds waypoint 1 to your route. And then to add another point, what you do is just select another one and make sure add is selected, and then you just click end again. And that's how you get them in the right order. So if I want to do waypoint 1 first, I put waypoint 1 in, and then the next waypoint I want to fly to, I select it and I click end again. And you can see it's in the right order now, waypoint 1, waypoint 4, and then end. And you can see they're connected. And if you put your waypoints in the wrong order, you can go to route menu and you can just reverse your route like that. And that could also be useful if you flew your route and then you want to fly back. So you can just keep adding waypoints. So let's say I want to go to waypoint 6 next. I need to click add here and select it and then click end. So I added enough points. You can also delete points from your route. You click delete and then you click one here, and now waypoint 6 is not in the route anymore. And when you delete a point, it doesn't permanently delete the point. If I click coordinates, you can see waypoint 6 is still here. It just takes it out of your route. So once you're done setting up your route, you can deselect this, and you can see your route here. And basically, once you have a route, you can see which current point is selected. So the underlined one is the waypoint to fly to, so waypoint 4. And you can see the fly to point with your IHADs, and you need to have a specific mode. So you need to have these buttons, symbology, select, switch, down, and up. So if you go down, it's your hover mode. So if you have it in hover mode, you're not going to see it. So you need to go up. And if you click up, it switches between your two flight modes. So make sure one of your flight modes is selected. And also you can't be on the ground. Once I get into the air, then you can see your waypoint. So once I'm in the air, you can see the point right there. It's kind of like a diamond. That is the current point to fly to. So once I get to waypoint 4, it automatically then will select waypoint 2 next, and it'll just keep going up until you get to the end of your route. So that's how you fly with your route. You can also see where to fly to on the top of the IHADs with this arrow right here, and also on the flight page, you can see this arrow right here points to your current waypoint. And you can also see waypoint 4, and you can see the distance 1.8 kilometers away. Now, unfortunately, you cannot select a specific waypoint in your route to go to. Like once you hit waypoint 4, it switches to the next one, and you can't, if I select it here, it just gives you info about the waypoint, but it doesn't actually select it to nav to. See, I still have this point to nav to. So if you need to fly to a specific point, what you need to do is direct mode. So make sure you're in the route menu and you click direct mode. And in direct mode, you select a point like waypoint 2. And you can see now it has a bright line going to waypoint 2. And that's not there anymore. And now my plate's over here to fly to waypoint 2. So you can just select direct mode and click any one you want to take you directly to that point. And also keep in mind that in direct mode, you don't necessarily need to go to a point that's in your route. You can go to any point. For example, if I click route and click direct, this target point here is not in my route, but I can still select it, and now you can see it. And if you want to get out of direct mode, what you can do is just go to the route menu and just deselect and reselect your route, and then it goes back to normal. The last thing to go over with nav is the utility page. So if you click util, You can see information here. So the auto page has to do with the defensive systems I talked about earlier. You can see the date and time. You can change it between Zulu or local time. And you can also change the time and date, but the manual said they recommend not changing it because it gets the time and date from GPS systems. And if you go in here and change it, it can mess up stuff. So you should just leave that. And then there's two INS systems in the helicopter, which is kind of like the navigation system. So if one of them is messed up, you should be able to click this to reset it, but I'm not sure if there'd really be any functionality for that in DCS. And you can see the primary INU here. This is the main one that it uses first, and if it gets messed up, it switches to the other one. And you can also see position confidence. So right now it's green and it says 0 kilometers, which means it's extremely accurate. But if it becomes inaccurate, you'll see this number start to get bigger. And the main time you use this is when you're starting up. So when you're starting up, it'll be white and it'll be not very accurate. And when you're starting up, you need to wait for it to turn green, and then you can start flying. And then you can see Doppler data. So the Doppler is a radar on the back of the helicopter, or on the bottom. And what it does is it measures your movement across the ground, and it can help aid in figuring out where you are. So you can actually turn the Doppler off right here by clicking this button, but I'm not sure why you'd turn it off. I recommend just turning it on. And you can see right now the Doppler is rejected because I just turned it on, but if it gets accurate data, it'll accept Doppler data to aid in figuring out, where you are. And these just show what GPS satellites you're connected to. And key type and key load has to do with GPS. I'm not sure if it's really modeled in DCS or if it really does anything. But in the Util page, the only thing here you'd really look at is just position confidence. And if it's green, it means you're accurate. If it's white, it means you're not that accurate. So that's the Util page. That was navigation for the Apache. Thanks for checking out this video, and I'll see you later.